back to my channel. I hope that you're doing well. Welcome to another video, and welcome back to a video where I rank every dark romance I've ever read. This is going to be a video where I bring together all of the books that I have read that are rated dark, however it is that you deem that necessary, and I'm going to rank them based off of how dark I think they really are. And hopefully this could be a tool if you're just getting into dark romance and you want to ease your way into it and slowly build up to darker and darker reads. Or if you're a seasoned dark reader and you want some dark books that you haven't yet picked up, hopefully you can get some really good recommendations. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. I've been meaning to film it for a while. I hope that you enjoy it. Grab a snack, grab a drink, and without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so as you can see, I have my tier list set up here. I'm using Tier Ranker. I will leave the link down below if you guys want to check out anything, or maybe rank this list yourself if you've read a good majority of these. But I have the top of the darkest reads. We have Dark Doesn't Even Describe It. One below that is Please Turn on the Lights. The middle range is like dimmed but manageable. The second to last section is Morally Gray, so you know it's dark, but I wouldn't really call it morally gray. And then Black, Gray, White, Who Cares? This is like books that I wouldn't recommend, I didn't enjoy, and take that as you will. You know, reading is subjective, but these are the ones that I personally wouldn't recommend. Now, this is going to be a very hard list for me to tier rank because some of these books are some of my favorite books of all time, and so I automatically want to put them in the top, but that doesn't always mean that they are the darkest reads. So I also have only picked the first book in every series, so I'm going to talk about the series as a whole, depending on how dark the series gets as it continues. So let's start with the very first one, a favorite of mine for sure, and that is Seventh Circle by Tate James. This is a dark mafia romance with a White Shoes relationship at the center. This one is definitely much darker than some of her other books that she has written. I wouldn't say it's the darkest that she's written, but it's damn well pretty close. So I'm gonna put this in Please Turn the Lights On. It is definitely a dark book, and I would say the fourth book in the series is the darkest of all four of them. Definitely has some on-page stuff that I would check the trigger warnings if you do have triggers, because it does get very, very dark, but I love this series so much, and I love how dark it gets. It's not the darkest I've read, but it's close. Up next, we have Lady of Rooksgrave Manor. This is another White Shoes, but it's set in Victorian times, and it is a very large White Shoes cast. This is not super dark. It has some dark elements, and it definitely talks about some dark topics, but I wouldn't call this overly dark. So I'm going to put this one in Morally Gray, just because I feel like there's some things above it, but not as dark as some of the other ones. So definitely a good one if you're looking to try out White Shoes romances. This is a monster romance White Shoes, so it's a really good one. It's not my favorite White Shoes I've read, but I have to recommend it because I think it's a really good starting place. Black Sunshine by Karina Halley. This is tough because I didn't really enjoy this book, but I wouldn't put it in Black, Gray, White, Who Cares? I might put this one just in Morally Gray. It was fine. Bound by Honor. This is a tough one because I know so many people love this book. I was not in the camp, so I'm gonna put it in Black, Gray, White, Who Cares? Because I wouldn't recommend it. I didn't have fun with it. I think there are plenty other mafia romances out there that are much better than this one. Broken Bonds by J. Bree. I would say dim but manageable. There are definitely some dark things in this series, a lot of murder and death, so definitely check the trigger warnings if you're interested in this White Shoes paranormal romance series, but it's not the darkest that I've read, and I definitely, compared to like Seventh Circle, I wouldn't put it in that category, so it has to go in the dimmed but manageable section. Brutal Prince by Sophie Lark. This is like a series that everyone talks about, the Brutal Birthright series, and yes, it is dark, but I'm going to put it in Morally Gray. I think this is a great place, a great starting place for dark romances. It's palatable, it's easy, it also has lots of humor and fun parts to it, and definitely can get dark at times, but I think it would definitely fall under the Morally Gray section. And like I said, a great starting point if you're just dipping your toe into dark romance. Up next, we have the Devil's Night series by Penelope Douglas. This series is really tough for me because I didn't love book 1 as much as I wanted to, and book 2 I enjoyed more, but it's dark. It's definitely dark. I don't know where to put this though, because maybe my dark is not the same as your dark, but I personally think this one is dark. Doesn't even describe it. There are some things that these characters do to the female lead that I think are far beyond the scope of where things should go. Now again, this is my personal preference when it comes to reading dark romance. Somebody might read this and say this is not dark at all, and that's great for you, but some of the things that they do to this main character, I just felt it was a little bit far across the line, and so for that I do have to put it in this section. That being said, it'll probably end up at the tail end of this tier once I reorganize everything, but it's definitely a dark one. Credence by Penelope Douglas. I wouldn't necessarily put this into dark, as more taboo, and it's based off of how you like to read. I'm gonna put this one in, I'm stuck between dimmed and manageable and please turn out the lights, but I'm gonna have to put it in the middle section. It's definitely more taboo, and depending on what you like, it might give you the ick, but I wouldn't really call it dark, so I think that's where I'm gonna put that one. Desperate Measures by Katie Robert. I'm gonna put this one right into morally gray. The series is, yes, dark, but it's not the darkest that you ever read. Again, a great dip into dark romance, especially if you like retellings. This one is a very fun series full of Disney retellings where the female heroines end up with the villains of their stories. So I think that it was great. I had a fun time with it, and it is definitely a great starting place. Up next, we have Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. If you're comparing this book to the other H.D. Carlton book that's on this list, I would not call it overly dark. Does it have dark aspects? Absolutely. So I'm going to put it in Please Turn on the Lights, but I don't think it's the darkest book on this list. Sometimes some of these are really hard because I feel like it's going to be based off of your interpretation, what you think dark is. So this is all coming from me, but I think it is definitely one of the darker ones. For Psychos, I'm going to put this one in black, gray, white, who cares, because the longer and longer that I think about the series, the less and less I like it. This is another white shoes romance inspired by the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And it had a lot of issues. It's dark, it's fun, it's spicy, but I just couldn't care less, and I definitely wouldn't recommend it. Up next, we have Games We Play by Dana Ainsley. I'm not a huge fan of this author, but I do really like this book. It was a great time. It was very, very spicy. So take that as you will. If you are interested, you can look into the author's controversy on your own. I'm not going to go into that, but we're going to talk about the book in and of itself, and I definitely think this one is fun. It's dark because it deals with like degradation, BDSM, kink, but I wouldn't say it's the darkest book on this list. I'm gonna put it in Please Turn Out the Light. It's definitely dark depending on what you like to read, but I had a lot of fun with it. Hate by Tate James. I'm gonna put this one also in Please Turn Out the Lights, but I'm gonna put it under the Hades series. It's definitely not as dark as the Hades series, but it does have a romantic suspense aspect to it as well as some mafia ties, so it does have dark aspects for sure, and I had a great time with it. Tate James writes some of the best smutty, dark, YG romances, so this one definitely is high up on my list. Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. This one has to go in dark. It doesn't even describe it. Some of the things that happen in this book are just so off limits. It's terrible. But did I love it? Abso-fucking-lutely. I know that everyone talks about the gun scene. That's one of my favorite scenes of all time, and I read it in multiple other books, and it always gets me, but it's not for everybody. That's just one of the many scenes that's very dark in this book, and it definitely has dark themes all the way throughout. It is a stalker romance, so please check your trigger warnings, but it's a fun one. It's dark, but it's fun. Honey Trap by Tate James. I'm also going to put this one in dark. Doesn't even describe it because you are following mercenary killers, and this one also has a gun scene, so again, I love that. You may not, but I do. But it is definitely a dark, dark series. Lots of torture, murder, blood. It's a lot. There is on page SA, so lots of things happening in here. It's a dark one, but again, so good. I love Tate James, so I think I'm a little biased. Hooked by Emily McIntyre. This is a retelling of Peter Pan where Wendy ends up with Hook. It's set in a contemporary world. This one is definitely morally gray. Ooh. Yeah, morally gray. I wouldn't put this in the darkest romances that I've ever read. It's definitely, again, a great stepping stone if you're just dipping your toes in, and I think it's a very fun one. Up next, we have Hush Hush Baby. I can't remember the author of this one, but this is like a 19-page novella. It's very, very short, but it is dark. It follows a girl that wants nothing more than to be taken advantage of by somebody that she doesn't know that breaks into her house. That's like her biggest fantasy, and she wants to make sure that it gets played out. So, I'm gonna put this in dark, doesn't even describe it, because there's definitely some interesting things that happen in this short little novella, but I had so much fun with it. Now we're gonna talk about It Ain't Me Babe by Tilly Cole. Again, up to interpretation, but this one is a pretty dark read for me. I think that is one of the darkest romances that I have read that deals with some of the topics that it does. This one follows a girl who is just coming out of a very terrible cult experience where she has basically been sexually assaulted her entire life, and she has some of course, some very intense trauma from that, and ends up at the door of the River Styx Motorcycle Club with a man who is a selective mute. He has a speech impediment, and he has a very, very, very dark upbringing and past as well, and they sort out their stuff together. It's very dark, but it's very good. There's way too much use of the word bitch in this story, so if you don't like that, don't read it, because it's like in every other freaking page, but it's a really good dark romance. Up next, we have another J. Bree series that I didn't like. I DNF'd to this series after book 1, and that is Just Drop Out. I'm going to put it in black, gray, white. Who cares? Because I could not care less about talking about it. Up next, we have The King of Libertines, which is the novella in the Sea of Ruin series by Pam Godwin. I'm going to put this one in morally gray. I believe that the actual main novel of this one is much, much darker, but this book in and of itself was not dark at all, really, and I think it's a great stepping stone, but please hear me when I say I've heard nothing but good things about Sea of Ruin, but I've heard it is very, very, very dark. Up next, we have Lola and the Millionaires by Catherine Moon, the same author as Lady of Brooksgrave Manor. Again, I'm going to put this one in morally gray. This one does have some darker aspects to it because it does deal with somebody that has trauma from sexual assault, so keep that in mind. But overall, I would say this is a very easy, light, dark romance. The main character does deal with trauma, and it is talked about very well, but overall, the book focuses more on the relationships that she has with these 4 or 5 men. It is no megaverse white shoes romance, so check your trigger warnings if you need to, but I would say that it's not as dark as some of the other books on this list for sure. And it's definitely another great, easy step into dark white shoes romances. Up next, we have a series that I love. I have actually, this is the only one where I have both of the books separately because I feel like each book is a little darker than the other. So for Melt for Us, I'm going to put this one in Please Turn on the Light. This is a Christmas white shoes romance with masked men. It is the follow-up to Scream for Us by Molly Doyle. Scream for Us, I'm going to put right into dark, doesn't even describe it. These are unhinged romances, but I think that the first one was definitely a little bit more unhinged than book 2, so I think I had to put them in separate sections. But I love these novellas. They are short. They do have audiobooks. I believe the audiobooks are being redone, so if you're looking for the audio, I believe it's coming back, but I loved it. I loved it. They're dark, they're sexy, they are unhinged in the best way, and I definitely recommend them if you're looking for a good holiday read. Up next, we have Merciless by Willow Winter. This one's gonna go straight into gray, black, white, who cares, whatever the iteration of that is. I didn't care for this one. Not a great read for me. Again, there are better mafia books out there. Not worth my time. Neon Gods by Katie Roberts. I'm gonna put this one in morally gray as well. I feel like her books are not overly dark. They do have dark themes and they do deal with dark topics, but they are relatively manageable when it comes to dark romances. Pestilence by Laura Thalassa. This one's tough because I feel like this is dark in a different way, but I'm gonna put it in dimmed but manageable. This one follows the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse as they come down to Earth and wreak havoc and kill people, but they fall in love with human women. So you do see a lot of on-page death. So if you're not okay with that, this is not going to be the series for you. But other than that, I wouldn't say there is a large amount of dark things happening. There's no like other things other than, you know, men killing other people. So depending on how you look at that, it's dark, but I think it's manageable. I don't know. That one's a tough one for me. Up next, we have Poison Roses by Jamin Eve and Tate James. This one I'm going to put in dimmed but manageable. This series does get very dark towards the end of the series, but the first 2 books are not as dark. This is another white shoes romance written by Tate James and co-written with Jamin Eve, but this is a rock star romance that does have mafia ties. So yeah, it's dark, but it's definitely a manageable dark romance. Jamin Eve doesn't tend to write super, super dark stuff, so I feel like they found a really good balance between the 2. Another Katie Robert books, this is the Court of the Vampire Queen. It's a novella bind-up, but the first one that I have here, I believe this is Sacrifice. This is another white shoes vampire romance. I'm gonna put this one, again, in morally gray. Pretty light on the dark stuff, but it is technically still dark. Satan's Affair by H.G. Carlton, the novella that comes before the Hunting Adeline cat and mouse duet. Wow. This is probably, if not the most unhinged novella I've ever read. It's so dark, and it's very, very, very dark for a lot of different reasons. There is a lot of blood, gore, death, killing, but it's also a white shoes romance, but it's unhinged. Just wait till you get to the end. It's wild. But it was so, so good. I love Sibby. She's a great main character, and we are getting a full series with just Sibby's perspective, so I'm very excited for that, but it's a dark one, for sure. Scorn Princess, as you guys can probably tell, I like a lot of white shoes romances, and they do tend to fall into the dark romance section. So Scorn Princess is another white shoes mafia-style romance. I would put this one in dimmed but manageable. Comparatively to the Tate James mafia romances, this one is much less dark, but still definitely on the dark spectrum. Another Why Choose Romance. This is written by Caroline Peckham and Susan Valenti, the authors of the Zodiac Academy series. This one is dark. It does have a lot of dark themes, and there's definitely a lot of on-page like torture and stuff. So I'm gonna put this one in Please Turn on the Lights. I would definitely say check the trigger warnings. It's a very long series and it gets darker as we progress, but it does fall into the pretty dark category. Still Beating. Wow, this is one of the most emotionally taxing books that I've ever read. This one follows two characters that get kidnapped by a serial killer, and during captivity they are forced to do very dark and depraved things with each other, and when they come back out of 3 weeks of captivity they don't have anyone else to turn to and they end up falling in love with each other. It's also a forbidden romance because they are soon to be sister-in-law and brother-in-law. The female main character, her sister, this is her fiance, so lots of dark stuff happening in here. It's definitely gonna go in. Dark doesn't even describe it. It's a tough one to read, but so good. Sweet Obsession, to be honest, I can't even tell you whether or not I recommend this because I don't remember what it's about. I think from what I can remember, it's a lot like the Madison Kate series, and a lot of the same themes and topics are talked about in this one, but I think it's a little less dark, so I'm gonna put it in dim but manageable. I would still recommend it. I think it's a Why Choose Romance, but I can't remember off the top of my head if it's really that good. Sorry. The next up we have another novella, Sweet Sin by Savar Miller, the prequel novella before you get into Promises and Pomegranates. This is a Hades and Persephone retelling. It is dark, but I'm gonna put it in morally gray, at least for the first novella. It wasn't as dark as I think the series is supposed to be, but that's just because we got a very small glimpse of this series, so I'll leave that at that. Up next we have That Sick Love by Jessie Hall. Again, this is like right up there with Haunting Adeline. This is some dark shit, like holy crap. It's so dark and it's so twisted, but it is so good. Another stalker romance that has very heavily religious themes. So again, check the trigger warnings for all the books that I talk about today. But this one, it's dark, but it's good. Next up, we have The Dare by Holly LaRoe. This is the prequel novella in the Losers series. A lot of prequel novellas. But I'm going to talk about The Dare and Losers Part 1 because those are the only two that I've read as a whole and how dark they are. I'm going to put this one in dimmed but manageable. This definitely does have heavy degradation and humiliation kink, but overall, I would say the romances in and of itself are very sweet and wholesome, just with a lot of kinks thrown in. Keep in mind, check the trigger warnings again, but this one is dark, but it's dim and manageable, and definitely a good one to start with if you like Why Choose, degradation, BDSM, kink. The Never King by Nikki St. Croix. This is a Why Choose Peter Pan retelling, fantasy edition. And I didn't love the first book in the series. I haven't read on with the series, and I don't know if I would necessarily call it the darkest thing that I've read. I think I'm just gonna put it in morally gray, mostly because I can't remember the details, and I don't want to give the wrong impression, but maybe I should put it in dimmed but manageable. I think that the characters are pretty cruel to her, but I can't remember. I'm gonna put it in the middle. That way, if you are just dipping your toe in, maybe don't take that one as a recommendation. All right, up next we have the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey. This is a bind up of like 5 novellas following a serial killer who is getting revenge on people that have wronged her, and the FBI agent that is assigned to taking down this serial killer. They fall in love, but he doesn't know that she is the one that he's hunting. It's a fun series, but it's definitely dark. I'm gonna put this one in Please Turn on the Lights. It does talk about, you know, death and murder in great detail, so make sure to check the trigger warnings, but I like that series so much. I need to finish it, but it's a good one. All right, up next we have There Are No Saints and There Is No Devil by Sophie Lark. This is another serial killer stalker romance. This one is tough because I would definitely say it is dark. I just don't know where I would rank it on this list, but I think I would have to, just because of the content matter, put it in Please Turn on the Lights, just because it does, you know, deal with people that are killing other people, and it is talked about on page, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, so I'm gonna have to go with Please Turn on the Lights. But of all of them, I think that this one would fall on the lower end of the spectrum on that particular tier. Twisted Love has to go into morally gray. This is technically marketed as a dark romance, but I would say that it is a very easily digestible dark romance that you can easily step your toe into, just because it's not overly dark. Has dark themes, has dark topics, but overall it's just a pretty sweet, cute romance. Don't Stop Me. No. Black, gray, white, who cares? It was terrible. Don't read it. Heartless Heathens. This is another one that is extremely dark and has heavily religious ties to the story. This is another Why Choose romance that is very slightly inspired by The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I'm gonna have to put this one in... Oh, it's so tough. I'm gonna put this one in Please Turn on the Lights because of the other darker occulty type romances that I have read, this one is a little bit lower than that one, so I'll put it in that one. Heaven, no. Black, gray, white, who cares? Do not recommend. It is a novella. It's short, but I don't even want to talk about it. Jacked by the Jack-o'-lantern. This is a Halloween novella, male-male romance between a human man and a man every Halloween turns into a jack-o'-lantern guy. Morally great. It's not dark. It's just a fun time. It could be fun if you're interested, but I don't necessarily know that I would recommend. Obsession. This is a White Shoes Omegaverse paranormal romance. I'm gonna put this one in morally gray. It's not overly dark. It is definitely a sweet romance, but it does have dark themes. That being said, I think there's like some like bully aspects to it, so keep that in mind if you're gonna go into it, but it's definitely not as dark as some of the books on this list. Up next, we have Riding the Headless Horseman. No, just no. I know everybody and their mother is talking about the series and absolutely loving it, but it is a no from me. Thank you. And lastly, we have The Blood and Roses Part 1 by Kelly Hart. I have not read Part 2, but this is a collection of 6 novellas in 2 bind-ups. And it does have dark ties. It is a mafia crime syndicate type romance, but I'm gonna put it in dimmed but manageable. It's not super dark. Again, dark themes, murder, essay, fun stuff like that, gunfights, things like that, but it's not the darkest that I've ever read. All right, I'm gonna quickly just go through and change the ranking of these one in each tier, just so I can have a comprehensive list of what I would absolutely recommend for people that are just starting out and absolutely recommend for people that are looking for the darkest of the dark.
I hear you breathe, that healthy breath. I know it's all of you that I get. 1 bedroom flat, I lock the door and put that photo.
Okay, I think this is my kind of comprehensive list. That Sick Love, I think, has to take the top tier of some of the darkest romances I've read. I couldn't really choose between Satan's Affair and Hunting Adeline, but I think Satan's Affair, for how short it is and what all that it packs into it, has to go above Hunting Adeline, or Haunting Adeline, I should say. It Ain't Me Babe, so dark. Still beating. It's not the mafia ties, but this is just so dark in the content matter that it has to be high up there. And then we have Honey Trap, Scream for Us, Corrupt, and Hush Little Baby. And then Seventh Circle I put at the top. I think it's the darkest of the ones on this list. Heartless Heathens is a close second, and then Hate by Tate James. Then Does It Hurt, Melt for Us, The Risk, Sinner's Playground, There Are No Saints, and Games We Play by Dana Ainsley. And then the only other one that I really messed around with to a large extent is the Dim but Manageable. I put Poison Roses at the top because I think the end of the series does get pretty dark. Then The Dare, just because it does deal heavily with kinks that not everyone's going to love. And then Pestilence, Broken Bonds, Scorched Princess, The Blood and Roses, Sweet Obsession, The Never King, and Credence. And then the only 2 that I really changed in the morally gray section was Hooked. I put it at the top because I think that the themes that it talks about and some of the revenge aspects of this can be a little bit off-putting for some people, so I wanted to put it high up there. But everything else is kind of interchangeable. I really just did move Twisted Love all the way down to the bottom because I feel like, I don't know, of the things that happen in this book, it's mostly just a romance with some dark aspects thrown in. And then the bottom I didn't touch at all because who cares? Alrighty friends, that is the end of this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I always have so much fun talking about romances that I have read, and I think that it's fun to just like tier rank things that have absolutely no meaning to anybody but me. If you are interested, I will leave this linked down below if you would like to tier rank this own list if you've read a good majority of the ones that I mentioned here today. And let me know if there's any other tier ranking videos you want to see from me in the future. I just love putting things in order and making them look organized in my brain and on screen. But if you made it to the end of this video, leave a blood drop emoji if you don't want to comment anything else. But that is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to give it a big old thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe before you leave. And of course, leave any comments, questions, suggestions in the comment section below. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.
Thanks, baby. Turn it down like a sweet